today's discussion is on the future of acting training in America.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. It's a pleasure having you here. We have the heads of 4 different programs from the Philadelphia region, and we're going to talk about training in the theater during the COVID epidemic and beyond the COVID epidemic, with the goal of looking for a narrative that might be useful for us. We're very much in the moment. We're not able to look back on anything yet. But I think it's useful to start conversations even in the moment to try to figure out where we may be evolving, where maybe we have already evolved, if there's meaning to this chaos.
So my name is Mark Wade, and I run I'm co-director of the Theater Arts program at Arcadia University in Glenside.
Thanks, Melanie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melanie Stewart, and I am the Associate Dean and a Professor of Theater and Dance at Rowan University. So I oversee all the academics in the college and teach in the theater program.
Thank you, Nick.
I'm Nick Anselmo. I am the Director of Theater and the Mandel Professionals and Residents Project at Drexel University, and I'm also the Executive Director of the Mantua Theater Project.
Thank you, and Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Reynolds. I'm the Head of Musical Theater and the Assistant Chair at Temple University in Philadelphia.
Great, thank you all. I'm Elaine Savin, Artistic Director of EgoPo and Head of Acting and Directing at Rowan University, and I'll be acting as moderator today. So as I said, the goal is to try to get underneath the surface of what's going on, but also for those of you who aren't within theater academia, just to paint a picture of what is going on, just so you have access to that. So first question, just briefly, what were the 1 or 2 weeks leading right up to the launch of Quarantine Light? Just because a lot of our listeners won't have been inside of that process. What did that process look like for you? And anybody can start who would like.
We had our NAST visit, our once a decade NAST visit, right at the end of February, and then we went right into spring break. We're back for a week, and then the quarantine happened. We were actually in the middle of Vondelprobe for a George and Joy Abbott concert on the evening that the email came from the president, mid-Vondelprobe. And it turned out to be a pretty amazing evening because the orchestra and all the students decided to stay and sing through the rest of the concert after the announcement happened. And it turned out to be a pretty special evening and tough for the seniors, but it was a beautiful evening.
And so, Peter, you had your teachers got informed when did they have to be up online and virtually teaching?
Pull out the calendar. It was Wednesday evening, March 11th, that we heard at the Vondelprobe, and we were online teaching Monday the 16th.
So your teachers had basically 2 work days and 2 weekend days to convert their entire classes to virtual learning and be back up with their students.
Yes.
Wow. All right, Nick.
Yeah.
We were on a quarter system, so we were just wrapping up winter quarter, and so we got to the end of classes for winter, and then finals went online. And then we were fortunate that we had spring break and another week to learn the software, retool our classes, but start in a remote environment. So that was, for me, I think that was better. At least we started in this world and we continue on in this world.
Okay, so you're doing a full quarter of virtual classes.
Right. I mean, we're only halfway through right now.
Yeah, gotcha.
Wow. We were 3 or 4 days away from spring break. We got an email saying that the last 2 days before spring break, we needed to convert our classes to online to check to see if we had the capabilities and if our students had the capabilities to receive the material. We were in the last week of rehearsal for a show, and we convened as a department to decide what we should do about the show. We decided to pull the plug on the show and postpone it until next year. And we are glad we did it because that was a Wednesday night, I think. and the cast, like Peter's, was able to do a run of the show. They were actually preparing to go into tech, so they got to do the show, and then the next day, we basically knew that we weren't coming back after spring break. So yeah. So we had 2 days to prepare to test, and then we had a week to get ready for the return of students.
Great, thank you. Melanie?
We were also in production for Urinetown. I think we were able to have a tech rehearsal performed as fully as possible. The call for the audience was, you know, hey, we're gonna do this in a couple of hours. This looks like this is gonna be it. And so the group really pulled together, and it was bittersweet and I think difficult for a lot of folks. And we got over that hump and went into another similar to Mark 2-week period in which we had spring break and another week to collaborate and come together and create plans for each of the courses to happen remotely.
Great, thank you all. So for everybody, it's an abrupt process. Normally, online teaching normally a course to convert to online is about a year-long process, if I'm correct, of a teacher working with a department in the university that helps with online virtual education. It gets converted, and often those teachers are expert at virtual education. In this case, you guys all had huge staffs of teachers who had never done any virtual education before. And classes that had never even been considered in anybody's wildest imagination as classes that would be candidates for virtual education, like dance classes and movement classes. So what has the last 7 or so weeks been like? What's been your experience as a teacher and or as an administrator with faculty that you're responsible for? Yeah, just share that, because I don't think we get to hear from the teachers' perspectives all that often.
I think the biggest struggle for me was just how dramatic the technological divide in America is. I had students who, because they were home, now had responsibilities to take care of siblings. Some of the siblings were like infants, 2-year-olds. I had students who had no private space. I'm trying to teach an acting class. I had students who were only using phones. They didn't have an iPad. They didn't have a laptop. And trying to create some equity without actually asking the question, what don't you have? It was, I think, the most difficult part of the transition for me was just looking and seeing what the struggles were for many of my students.
And what classes have you been teaching online, Mark?
Beginning scene study and intermediate scene study.
Great. And at some point, we'll just talk about how on earth we're teaching these classes. But yeah, let's just go on down. What's been your experience the last 7 weeks?
I just want to share how proud of my students I've been. I have not had one absence, not one. With 3 courses, they've been there every single time. And we were encouraged to really check in every class with the students and see how they're doing and talk. And they were really supportive of us and appreciative of what we were having to do as faculty. I just found them gracious and game and willing to make the most out of it. But yes, Mark, I'm with you. The scene study was tricky. The solo course is not quite as much, but scene study indeed.
I'm teaching a course that I call the Journey of the Mask. And so we had moved through neutral mask, and I was able to distribute larval masks before they went off campus, and had them buying their clown noses for the final smallest mask. And it was a huge challenge. I would sometimes feel so joyous and feel like there was a triumph, and alternately feel like a complete failure in terms of being able to reach them and communicate the ideas and the physicality specifically about how you bring these masks to life. But I also was hugely proud of my students who would make videos, and I assume that others are doing this, that they would submit every week. And so you just open them up and you see these students in these masks, whether they're on the patio or in a corner in a bedroom, and working with an object or trying to bring some life to this very otherworldly character. And I would say that I also felt like I was in another world, buoyant in a very strange time continuum, and the opportunity to meet them in person once a week was my anchor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, going along with Melanie saying, and I think everybody's sort of saying at the time, it's been fascinating and frustrating at the same time. But I have found that a lot of my students, so my program's a little bit different in that I don't have a theater major, so I serve the entire university and specifically provide training for entertainment and arts management students, screenwriting, playwriting students, film and video students, and digital media, gaming and animation students. So some of the things that I've noticed is that in this world, some of them are less inhibited and actually doing and being a little bit more brave and taking more chances. So I have found it to be really interesting, this whole environment.
I'd be curious just for us to share a little bit, just what are the logistics? What's the hardcore, what are we doing online in our classes, or have been doing online in our classes? I'm teaching an advanced acting class, a script analysis class, and a directing class. Script analysis is 35 students, and I'm sitting on Zoom just like this twice a week, and I made a decision, and it was a very tough decision. All teachers have a choice between what's the word? Teaching in the present moment or teaching in a non-exact
synchronous or asynchronous.
Asynchronous and synchronous teaching, a term that none of us knew 3 months ago. Synchronous teaching means we're live with them at set times in our date book and we get on at that time. And asynchronous means there's different ways for them to interact with the class in their own time frame. So all of mine have been synchronous because I personally needed the structure, and I assume they needed the structure. And for me, so much about theater is discipline and structure. It is hitting call times for rehearsals and et cetera. And so I just wanted to keep that structure for them. And in script analysis, it's a lecture discussion class. It's 35 kids. There's 35 boxes on the screen, and we have presentation day where each kid presents for 2.5 minutes, which we used to do in the classroom. So it's exactly like the classroom. My acting class was a monologue-based class, so it's easy, and we do monologue coaching one at a time on the Zoom boxes with everybody else watching. And then directing is tricky because directing is all about being in the room. It's not film directing. Theater directing has its own set of lessons and rules that have nothing to do with the existence of a video camera. And so we figured out our way to make it useful. It definitely felt like we were putting a round peg in a square hole. But we figured out how to use Zoom frames. They were very creative about how to place Zoom boxes on the screen and have interactions spatially across the Zoom screen. And we played more with scale. We found changes that we had to do in terms of minimalism and how much more time and space was needed. And that was sort of interesting. We could talk about the nuts and bolts of theater directing and how it had to alter to make what happened on the screen still hold our attention. What are your classes looking like?
What you were saying, Lane, I think our environment right now, our world right now, is we're teaching in this world. We need to teach in this world. Like, we need to adjust for what this is and take advantage of it. I'm teaching a cabaret class and a song performance class, and this sort of simple honesty of being here and focusing on the language and telling the story and not being concerned with some kind of big performance, like, is a great place to start, and it's great grounding. And then they can see themselves. And so that's another tool. They can watch that recording. So I think as long as we sort of look at this as, rather than trying to do what we used to do this now in this world and teach to this tool. Like you said, Lane, I mean, you made some adjustments. We're always making adjustments in the theater. So, you know, like, they can take those adjustments and then do that live. I think that they can extend that learning as well. That's sort of my opinion.
Yeah, logistics of the teaching, Mark.
Yeah, so the scene study class was interesting, but there were some lovely things that came out of it. I started working without the camera and just focusing on the listening. I'm a Meisner-based guy anyway, so like listening and answering is all about what I do. And what I found was when the cameras were off, and I also would excuse people from the room, so I could just focus on 2 people at a time, it freed many of them to make bigger choices, to be present and connected and concentrated in a way that I had never experienced them. The lack of an audience really helped some of them. The sense that Johnny isn't over there looking at his Snapchat feed, but is gone, and so it's only just about me and my partner, was actually really useful. And making that step out of it is going to be another interesting step for many of them. I relied on special guests as well. I called everybody I knew and said, please, God, come to Mom. And that, you know, the generosity of who we are as people in this world is amazing. And I was struck by how many people just said, oh my God, of course I will. Of course I will. Yes, of course. So we were working actually in one of my classes on scenes from Babel. And so Jackie Goldfinger came and listened and talked about how the play started and what it was about. And it was an amazing experience for the group. And, you know, for them to have the playwright hear them was exceptional. And then when we did do final presentations, that was pretty much the only, anybody could stay who wanted to stay and listen to other people working, unless someone who was working said, I'd rather be alone, which I respected. And some people did and some people didn't. But I think we got a lot out of the classes. Is it what I would have gotten in the room? No, but I really do feel like everybody advanced. Just one thing, and then I'll shut up. The thing that scares me is that this happened after I knew them for half a semester. So there was an understanding of what we do and how we do it and who I am and trust and all of that thing. So my concern is, how do we develop that with a group of students who we don't know if we have to be here next year?
It's a great thought and warning, Mark. I hadn't considered that at all.
I also
100.
felt that my students showed up in a way that was highly intimate and that no one could hide. You could not hide in this framework. So we have this saying, you can't hide in the bushes if there are no bushes. And there are no bushes in this format. So seeing each person as uniquely individual and appreciating what they were bringing in this format, and also giving very individualized feedback when in a group setting I might give 1 or 2 comments that would apply to the whole group and kind of move on. Here, videos were being submitted weekly and I had to spend time with those, look at those, and then I wanted to be live in the class when we met and do exercises. So creating those exercises for these frames was a huge creative challenge for me to translate the work from being in the room to this format. So where we would review 1 or 2 of the submissions, I didn't want to spend my entire class time doing that. So my relationship with the students became about that individualized feedback that I would post to them. And yeah, again, there were valuable, beautiful gifts in this format, and also a longing for something else.
Peter, what did the practicalities of your teaching look like?
I I basically concur with everything I just heard. It's all absolutely true. I would just add that I was pretty dazzled by some of the videos that were submitted, and in the scene study class, some things that they were able to figure out how to do that I no way could have figured out how to do. I had some trios and some duets with that were amazing videos. But we ended up doing a lot of the musical theater scene study class I shifted it to solos after we got through the first scene, which would have been the third scene that had been assigned. We shifted over to solos and a lot of individual coaching. And it is one thing that was an interesting surprise. My colleague and I did callbacks for Chekhov's Ivanov during this time, and the students submitted video, and then we did callbacks live on Zoom, and we were able to see people more efficiently in a more timely manner and feel like we saw more in this format than in a room at school with students coming in and out. So that was a pretty amazing surprise. And I said to my colleague, well, maybe we should do this with callbacks for all of the shows.
Bouncing off of that, so what are some of the positives and negatives that you take away from this period of virtual learning? So let's say we were going to go live, back to just fully live teaching in September. What do you want to make sure? What did you learn from this process to bring into your classroom in September? And for me, I'll start. For me, a huge thing is about the hiding thing that Melanie was talking about. That I realized that there were students that I was letting go without engaging, who I am engaging on Zoom, and I watched a few students just blossom because I literally called on them in a Zoom format in a way that I wasn't doing in the live classroom. This is particularly with larger groups, and it made me really want to make sure that I am more proactive about pulling out every student in the classroom and not letting them hide in the live classroom. That's one thing for me I want to take away.
Absolutely. I'm to go back to something Mark said, I feel like my biggest task will be, if this happens again, that period of time of getting to know them. Yeah. That's got to be put into the syllabus. You know, how do I get to know them on Zoom like in the classroom?
And I have found, we did a little bit of training with a gentleman named Leif Hansen out in California, and he did some exercises with us, icebreakers, and how you could use Zoom to do that. And in fact, get to know them a little bit more easily, because one of the exercises was grab something that's right around you, so something that's personal, and tell us about it. And just anything, a cup, a mug. You know, my niece gave me this mug, so it's important to me. And that was a great way to break the ice and sort of really get to know everybody in the class. So that's how I started in my quarter, with a number of those things, but you have to allow time for it. Yeah.
I noticed too, Melanie was referring to the work that they were doing away from the live Zoom meeting. And I think this allowed me to trust them more in terms of independent study from start to finish. Give them the space to make their own work, and trust that they will do that. Trust that they are passionate theater majors, and made you really exciting things away from your immediate mentorship. So that's a takeaway for me as well.
I think the use of guest speakers too, like Mark was saying, man, what had one of my improv teachers brought in his teacher from Missouri to do a class with his students, which was amazing to have, like, the mentor's mentor come in and teach you. So that was just exciting. But I think also that we could reach out to people all over the country, and yes, people in our industry are very generous and willing to share their gifts. And so that's been exciting for students.
In terms of acting pedagogy, anything that you have discovered in this process that's useful? I mean, Mark, you discovering that sort of blind, vocal ping-ponging as being a sort of useful technique.
Yeah, what's odd is the biggest discoveries for me were about how taking away the audience allowed the student to focus on the work. But how I bridge that in the classroom, I'm not quite sure, because the work is about being in front of the audience. But I don't know. Sorry.
Really, for me, it seems like a really good time to dig deep into your personal practice. And I provided support for the students, and also myself am engaging in very intense physical practices that are helping to train my body to be better in an acting situation. And so I teach physical theater. Obviously, the mask work is about acting with the body. And so, the frame of the head is not helpful in this format. So I strongly encouraged my students to, and gave them resources to be fully in their body. And what a great time. What a great time to find out how your pinky works and your little toe, and how this whole body is integrated, and how well, how strong you can get, and how you can improve breathing, and all of these sorts of things. These are things that we don't often have the bandwidth for, I think, when we're actively engaged in rehearsals and that sort of thing. So this time for me has been about digging into that side of things as well.
That's great, Melanie, because a lot of people are sort of thinking in the exact opposite direction this time, that this is a brutal time for the body, right? We're not exercising as much. We're spending a lot of time in this format in front of our computer screen, even more so than usual, and the body can get forgotten. And for those of you who aren't practitioners of theater, in the end, theater is a hugely physical practice. To do 8 shows a week is like being an athlete. It's an intense physical full body practice. And as audience members, you watch an entire actor's body much more so than you watch their eyes or their face. And so a lot of what all 5 of us have to do is bring students into that practice, that they think of themselves as a full body and voice up on stage, and not just, movie acting eyes. And most people think that's difficult, but it's interesting, Melanie, about having more time and space to do it. It means they're going to have to be really rigorous with their time structure to find them, right?
Yeah, I was trying to remind my students that this time is actually the closest replication of what post-graduation is going to look like for them if they want to be in this business.
You mean
You need to figure out how you're going to structure yourself, and how you're going to create space for your work, and how you're going to make sure that you do those vocal exercises that were just part of your curriculum every day. How are you going to be prepared for that audition that you don't know when it's coming, but that idea of you have all of this time that is actually yours, and you have to start to make those choices about, like, do I need to make another TikTok video? Do I need to watch Parks and Recreation for the 14th time? Or do I need to read a play that I've never read before? Or do I need to find a monologue? Or do I need to stretch? Do I need to go walk and breathe? If I'm a vocalist, did I actually sing today? Did I push myself in some way? What am I doing every day to make myself an artist? Because it's our discipline that creates that. And, that I've been trying to lay in. I have no control over it, but I keep talking about it. Like, this is an opportunity to begin to put in some discipline. And no better time, because there are so many pressures, just like when you graduate and you've got to figure out where you're going to work and how you're going to pay for that, and all of the things you need to do. And yeah, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of stress in everybody's life, but it doesn't really change.
That's great, Mark. It's a real, in a sense, a real positive that they they can work on this discipline practice now that there's the space to do that, because there really isn't during college. College forces a high amount of structure onto kids. And for those of you who aren't in theater, again, when you graduate and you begin this profession, it feels incredibly unstructured. Suddenly nobody's telling you what to do. And often you have long stretches of unemployment, and to stay structured in your artistic discipline is a huge challenge. So that's great. And right now there's opportunities. There's online yoga classes. You can pick up a voice teacher easily. There's so much you can do.
I wanted to share in a meeting yesterday, my colleague Maggie Anderson said something so beautiful. I said, Maggie, I have to share this tomorrow. And Melanie, you took us right down this path. She said, this is a quote from Maggie Anderson: "The gift of time is that the hustle and relentless train of productivity has temporarily stopped. So we can be reflective, we can study, we can go deeper into detail, thoughtfulness, and prioritize meaning."
Wow. Fantastic.
Fantastic, really beautiful.
Because it came out of a conversation where we were all saying, well, we have to do this, and we have to do this, and we have to put this online, and we have to do this outside, and we have to, you know.
Absolutely. Anything in terms of acting pedagogy, in terms of literally the training of actors? One thing for me is that I noticed that in Zoom, a big area of focus that's easier to focus on is the actors' focus on their scene partner in achieving an objective. So they'll blow up somebody else in class. It's called spotlighting. They'll spotlight somebody else in class, make that their scene partner. And we can work in a much more microscopic way to make sure that they're landing their text, that they're actually achieving their objective or trying to achieve their objective, and that they're reacting to what their partner gives them. What I don't know is I have no idea what level of the monologue coaching that I'm doing will look like when I go live with them. I have no idea after 2 months of coaching actors what it will suddenly look like if I'm in a room with them and go, oh no, that's way too small scale. What was I doing? Because in the end, you can't help but coach for the medium that you're working within.
Right.
Any other thoughts just in terms of pedagogy? How this is altering teaching, might permanently alter teaching?
I'm excited about getting back in the room and recognizing that distance is important, because I spend a lot of time telling people to move away from me and move away from each other. And that will no longer be a problem. So I'm looking forward to those days.
For people who don't know, what is during coaching or during auditions, what's the push away mark?
So I just, the tendency for many actors is to come as close to the auditioner, the audience, as is humanly possible. And it makes me crazy as a teacher. And I'm constantly saying, okay, you're training to be in the theater, which means you need to be at least 6 feet away from me, at least 6 feet away from me. Go to the other side of the room, please. And I also have this, I believe that there are two things that can happen once you get next to a person. And many actors, because they see most of the thing that is acting for them on television or in film, they're used to seeing two actors standing 3 inches away from each other. And I'm saying if you get that close, you can either hit them or kiss them. Those are the only two things you can do. Otherwise, you need to be farther away from each other. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I've learned to listen more, actually. I will say that I used to be one of those teachers who stopped people after a word and like, what are you doing? Because I was in Zoom, it gave me room to let them go longer, even though it would make me crazy. I would just let them go longer and let them find it themselves sometimes. And sometimes they didn't, but I discovered I can just shut up sometimes and it's okay.
Yeah, that's a great lesson for all of us, I think.
I found myself being much more generous with my comments and supportive to the students because I admired them so much for braving this storm. And I actually am looking for the opportunity to be in the room with them and give them a hard time and to really challenge them the way that I best know to challenge them which is in the room. I found myself reflecting on that a lot. And I do think that everything that they did was a miracle. I believe that.
You want to carry any of that generosity to the live classroom, or are you ready to let it go and become?
No, I don't want to. I want to get back to being in the room with them and on them, you know, in a certain way.
Yeah.
Having fun, you know.
If there are things we've learned that have been really helpful through Zoom and through this format, I think it's fantastic. I just hope that this will finally put to rest the idea that, you know, for the administrator who's sitting in an office who doesn't know and says, oh, well, they'll just teach that acting class for 50 people online. And it'll be the same fantastic experience for the student. It's not.
Well, let's riff on that. I mean, Peter, do they know that it's not a great experience? They're not in your Zoom classroom. Are they going to look at the fact that do any of you have fear that the fact that we just survived, or in Nick's case, are surviving a long stretch of virtual teaching, that virtual teaching will be forced on us in the future?
Absolutely have that fear, because we're always fleeing the financial tsunami. And there's certainly going to be one, and already is one right now.
I disagree. I think that the students value and understand how important the room is. And
students,
and
absolutely.
They will push the administration away from the idea that the online acting school is the way to go. They won't attend the online acting school. In droves, they won't attend. And I think that will allow us back in the room.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think that we're really focusing on size, scale, architecture, and I believe that the immediate future will have much more intimacy in terms of, if you're in a room with now a cohort of 2 or 3 that are physically distanced, there is that opportunity to coach and be in the room. However, it's smaller somehow. It's more specific somehow to this given set of circumstances.
I would suggest also that who comes in the room in the future are those people who are already feeling pressure from their parents about, like, you have to have a real major, or you can do theater, but you need a real major as well. I wonder how strong that voice becomes, and who then actually comes to our programs are going to be the most highly motivated, the ones who know that there's nothing else they can do, that they have to do this. And and they will not stand for just everything's online.
It's interesting.
But it's a two-edged sword.
We may see numbers fall in theater programs, not because of change of college, but from what you're saying, Mark, really from change of profession as a result of this, which would be fairly rational. It's clearly a volatile profession that could shut down for lengths of time.
Although the ingenuity of people sort of finding new ways to make this craft work in this world, too, I think has been really fascinating too.
And I'm also, we've had plagues in the world before, and theater has always come back. I take some comfort in the fact that there have been recurrent plagues, and theater's actually never gone away. It just keeps coming back.
The largest theatrical output happened in the 1920s after the last pandemic. I mean, 1927 was the year of the most Broadway shows premiering and the largest amount of theatrical output following that pandemic.
To that end, what are you saying to your seniors right now? This is a question of mine, but also a question of Andrea's that she just posted. When you're thinking about the immediate future of auditioning, booking, and working within the industry, How are you talking to your seniors?
I think there'll be pent-up demand. I mean, I do think that, I think it will be challenging. I'm telling them it will be challenging. I'm also telling them that this too will pass. And, you know, I talk freely to my students about how hard the road is from 22 to 30. And that part of being an actor is figuring out how to make it to 30, because that's when the roles actually exist. So it's not like they're actually missing out on that much, because the truth is that the 21, 22-year-olds that are coming out on the best year are still struggling. And so I don't think the balance is actually that far off from what it would normally be for everybody. There will be less opportunity, but I think that at some point it will regenerate, and they'll be able to take advantage of that regeneration.
I think too, in the idea of intimacy, I think the first year or so, don't know exactly, is going to be a time for intimate theater. I think it is a great time for artists to reinvent the way that we view theater, interact with theater. And I think that's to a huge benefit of young theater artists. Anytime that invention is needed, we are always going to depend on artists in their 20s to at least take a vital part in that process of evolution. And so I hope that, and in some ways I'm talking about my seniors, is yeah, the industry, the business may be greatly hampered for a year to 2 years, but the artistry may be highly ripe for your energies.
Yes, I think in the ecosystem, you know, that you know, the individual artist is hugely, hugely important. And while we might think that they're challenged in this moment, here is the time to dig into your personal practice, to find your chosen community, and to keep making it up. I think using that resourcefulness and the ability to collaborate across disciplines, whatever, is all fodder for incredible creative output.
Yeah, I've always felt that you need to create your own opportunities if you're going to last in this business. You need to create and find your niche. And I think that that's what this moment is, again. And you're right, Lane, they're young and they're creative, and this digital world is much more common and friendly to them. And I think that they're creating stuff. Peter has a former student, Katie Johansson, who's been doing some of the most brilliant work online, and it seems it may be silly at times, but those silly things evolve and they keep going into other things. And so it's great to see them. They're getting involved in readings online, and you know, I think that they're bridging this gap and they're making it work for them, and that's what they need to do.
One of the most wonderful things I've seen digitally on this, our student season, our student theater group at Temple did a reading of a student's new play, 45-minute play. And boy, they produced it on Zoom. You could click on the program and see a program online as you watched it. They were beautifully rehearsed, and we were listening to this student's new words and the play she had written. And I was thrilled at how well they did it and how entertaining it was of an evening.
I'm now going to take us down a challenging pathway, which is, how are you currently planning for the next academic year, and what changes or alterations do you foresee or discussing? So let us a little bit inside the private offices of you and your faculty and your deans.
3 syllabi prepared.
Say that again?
3 syllabi prepared, 1 fully online, 1 back, but with social distancing, and then a hybrid. It's kind of what we've been charged to do. And then, as Melanie...
How are you addressing the production season at this point?
Waiting to hear if we can even do productions. We're moving forward 100% with designs, and we cast Ivanov, and he had a couple rehearsals. It's set to go up very early in the fall. We carried over The Country Wife, which did not have a run, into the beginning of the fall, and waiting to hear if we can do it. We know for sure if we are not allowed to do Ivanov live, we'll definitely do a reading of it, a Zoom performance of it. But a lot of waiting to hear, and a lot of groups, as Melanie said, meeting and planning for different scenarios.
Yeah, we're not far along in terms of sort of planning in terms of specific classes, because we're in the midst of halfway through this quarter. But I immediately pivoted all of what we were doing to taking it online. How can we do what we were doing before, but just now online? So we were producing weekly improv shows still online. And it's fascinating to watch their work and watch them really grow weekly, because they can watch themselves and then say, oh, I see what I'm doing, and they're growing. We're putting our cabarets online, we're putting original plays online. So when I look at the fall, all I can think about is, like Peter said, 3 options, but being really flexible. Whatever we're going to choose to do, it's going to be either world, online, completely remote, filmed, and then put online, or done in person. And that's hard to find, but a lot of it is creating our own stuff.
We're actually in discussions about completely rethinking what we do with the first year experience. We have trouble imagining doing the courses, one of the courses, this course called Foundations. We have trouble imagining that in an online or hybrid version and call it that. I mean, like, it just doesn't feel like it's that thing anymore. So we're talking, and again, this is really early planning. I have no idea where it will lead. But we're talking about team teaching. We're talking about creating perhaps a course that takes first year students and also upper level students and mixes them in some way, because there are other courses that are meant for the sophomores and juniors that probably would be better if we just let them wait, or if we taught something different. So do we take those 2 cohorts and mix them somehow? And part of that is about numbers, and part of that is about who's actually going to be there. So we're a little bit up in the air, but we really are talking completely out of the box of and reorganization of what we try and do to actually meet either a hybrid or an online experience. Because I'm really, as I said at the beginning, I'm really worried about the getting to know them before I start to try and do other things with them. And part of our first year experience is about building ensemble, and getting to know them, and how do we find the space to do that, and ethically, how do we do it? How do we make this work for them? So I mean, there are plenty of things we could do. We can just have, if we're in a hybrid world where it's going to be online for the beginning and then we're all going to meet again, you could just load the front end with readings of plays and scenes and then work on them in the second half of it. But what if you don't get to the second half? And but we are really thinking completely outside of the box for now, and trying to create, knowing what we know now about having to teach online, what actually works and what could be useful, and how can we create a course. And then we have to have those discussions with the dean and the administration, because they're going to mean that there are going to be a cohort of students that are missing the class number that they need to graduate. And can I just wave that in as the co-chair, or is that going to be allowed? So there's a lot of moving parts, and it will be an exciting couple of months at least, I think.
Yeah, the students, all of our students have chosen our universities for a very specific reason. Um, they are have an affinity and a love for the particular faculty that teach in your programs. And so one of our questions moving forward, especially for the freshman class, is how do we provide them with that truly Rowan experience, like why they want to come and hang with us, you know? Because I agree that the ensemble-based physical theater training that we provide for freshmen is going to be almost impossible to achieve in the first semester. So what, aside from giving them all gen ed courses, what can we give them that would be so uniquely valuable in this time? So that's a huge question. And then what do you do for those students who are already with you, and how do they continue their journey forward? So I just am supporting you and thinking and trying to think in new ways. And as Lane says, trying to find the jelly in the donut, which is his directorial, one of his directorial concepts, at how we really get that experience that is unique to each one of our programs for our students.
It sounds like there might be some mix of taking classes that just feel like they're impossible to do in the way that they were created and meant to be and for the goals of that course to be met. And this is what I struggle with. If I'm going to teach movement and all my sophomores need to go through my movement class and I can't possibly reach the goals, now I could do a paste together virtual version of it and we'd be on our yoga mats at home, but it's not at all what the point of the class was, which is, for me, bodies in space reacting to each other in space. So I can't reach even the most minimal goals of the class virtually. Is it better to put that class off and put in the place a class that will be vital to them, but can fit but whose goals I can actually reach during first semester? So it sounds like you all are discussing this issue of maybe a mix of delaying certain courses, replacing them, or it sounds like, Mark, you're also talking about potentially even like fracturing a course into smaller meeting groups.
Or as Melanie was saying, you know, is there a way to introduce all of the members of the faculty into one classroom for a period of time, but how do you then, you know, how's that affect load and all that other stuff that administrators care about and we care about as well? Because one thing that is true of teaching in Zoom is it's a lot more work, actually. And it's not just the recreation of a new event. It's like taking care of these people in this environment is very different and much more time intensive and much more physically demanding and mentally debilitating than the day-to-day in-class experience. It's much more intense.
Piggybacking off of what you just said, there's actually a question online, which is, have there been any conversations about caring for the mental health of the students during this stretch, given that they're possibly in a more vulnerable situation, or if they were in a vulnerable situation, that it's exacerbated right now?
I started all my classes with check-ins. Everybody would gather at the beginning and we would talk about all of the things that were going on in their lives. There was a lot of support from the university, actually, for virtual mental health work. And, you know, my job was to help identify that and let people know that it was present for them. I think that's really hard. That's really hard because that is part of what, especially theater people, it seems to be, it's like we see them in distress because of what we ask them to do. And so we're constantly checking in with them and we're just, are you okay? And I see that really took you someplace you maybe weren't ready to go to today. Do you need to talk to somebody? Can I walk you down to health services? That's not an unusual part of my life in my experience as a teacher. And that can't really happen, you know, so it's a little tricky.
I was really impressed. Melanie at the dean's office for us was really instrumental in any student we felt like was disappearing in the process that would just drop out of Zooms, they would track down. And so this individual work of locating a student who seems to be fading out of contact was super useful. And that's something I would love for there to be a takeaway permanently, because that happens in the live classroom too. And often we go, well, they're grown up, and if they're going to fade away and stop showing up to class, so be it. I like this act of tracking them down, because for some of them, they were for very practical reasons. I had a student I didn't realize was a mother. And it was simply getting to be impossible time-wise to join class.
Our dean's office did that as well, and I agree with you.
Do you think there will be any long-term changes to theater education long after a vaccine is disseminated and we're back to live teaching? I personally think we're going to be asked to do gen ed acting classes to make them available online. I think now that they've seen, I think all of us have huge amounts of gen ed students going through non-major acting classes. And I think they're going to want to see a version of that online. At least we'll get a little bit of a pressure for it.
Probably right.
I think there may be more pressure for the classes, the lecture-based classes, the histories, those things, definitely taking those either online remotely or asynchronously. So, yeah.
We have such a large department. I'm actually kind of excited about the idea of having this venue for more performing options, because we have limited space. There's an amount of things we can actually do because of our space limitations. So this is a great venue to get more stage time, more experience.
Not to mention, again, these are tools that they'll need in the future. I mean, we're all submitting online auditions digitally, and those come up at the last minute. And yeah, it's easy to record yourself digitally, but if you've had some training in it, you can take advantage of the format and put forth your best audition. So, yeah, having more opportunity.
There's a question about whether we think, are we doing anything to train our students in terms of, or will we be doing anything in terms of finding alternative ways to produce theater during the social distancing? Are we going to include our students somehow in that process of figuring out how we make theater within the constrictions of social distancing?
Is it still theater? Do you know what I mean? I think we can create new forms. I'm not quite sure it's theater if we are doing it in Zoom or in distance. And maybe I'm just a dinosaur because I'm old as dirt. I'll be happy to admit that. But that's my struggle, is being in the room with other people is theater to me. And if we're not doing that, then we can be creating art and we can be creating something, and that's grand. But for me, it's no longer theater because the immediacy is gone. The ability to be in the room and concentrated with this group is gone. I think the hardest thing for me about taking in material, either in Zoom or online, is I'm too distracted by the computer and the ability to just flick and see if my email has changed, because I can still hear what's going on, but I've left, that's the same as standing up in the middle and going to the bathroom and coming back. You've missed something. So that's my struggle with the idea of, but I think the idea of creating new form, that's something that I'm happy to engage with my students in. How do we make this work that makes you feel good about what you're doing?
And I think that's what I mean. I agree. I really appreciate you saying that about the video medium. It's important for us to actually keep saying that over and over again. we have chosen a stupid, impossible art form to spend our lives doing. It makes economically no sense. It's logistically very difficult to get large crowds into a room at the same time with live actors. And we chose it for a reason, and that reason hasn't changed one iota, that we just feel like it's very important to be focused on a single thing in a live space with other human beings. But yeah, it was the idea that there's other forms that we're going to get in there. And I kind of actually miss my early days of an artist, where I was doing crazy things. I was doing promenade theater, where they walk through 15 rooms with live actors in them, one person at a time, and tiny intimate shows that happened one person, one actor at a time. And those things that I actually stopped doing for economic reasons, I'm actually excited to go back and reinvestigate those forms. And in fact, I think it was a great time for immersive theater brewing over the last few years anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that, Lane. And I know that you know that we've been challenged at Rowan by our producer to create a season that cannot be postponed or canceled, which is a very interesting question. So I give it to everyone to just take with them, what is that for each of us, and how does it remain theater? For Mark. Right?
Final question is a big question. Do we feel like the theatrical art form is going to evolve or change over the course of this epidemic? We're training the future of American theater. As they change, it's going to change. Any guess?
I definitely think it's going to evolve. I think we're going to find new things in this that work that maybe we can bring into the live experience. And we're going to find ways to augment the live experience by using these tools. So I think once the genie's out of the bottle, these young people are going to create and try to find more ways to assault our senses by using even more tools.
Well, and the things that were already happening even before this, the most recent West Side Story was, I'm old. I'm an old school musical theater guy. And I thought, I don't know what this is, but I went because my former student was in it and just loved it. Loved it and was so thrilled by the really up-to-date, right now, cutting-edge new way of looking at this classic piece. Excited me greatly.
And we're gonna, you guys keep talking, but I'm just gonna announce that we're gonna open this up for questions. So at this point, you can also go live with questions. Just use the hand raise function, and I will put you on audio to ask your question. While that's happening, guys, any ethical concerns right now as teachers in terms of coming back in the fall, how you're teaching online?
The only thing that came up for me in pondering this question was liability concerns that have come forward. And I participate in an online dance class, and I sign a waiver saying that I'm physically fit and able to do this work. So I think there has been concerns about people's environments and equity and how safe they are to do what we're asking them to do in the spaces where they live. So that's been a question that has come forward from others, and one that we're continually trying to address and making sure that everyone is cared for.
I think the issues of inequity are really ponderous. There are students who have dance studios in their house. Basically, there's a playroom downstairs that they just move the ping pong table against the wall and they're fine. And then there are other students who have no space. So it's not my job to say it's fair or not fair. It's my job to put the content there. But I just feel like the divide is so, it just keeps on growing and growing, and that worries me. it worries me, this idea of teaching acting for the stage without being on a stage is a little tricky for me. It's fine to be teaching acting in Zoom or acting in television, but it's not film because the frame is too small, and it's not theater because the frame is too small, and it's very specific. And I'm not quite sure. I think that the thing you said, Elaine, is I have no idea what it will look like if I'm working with someone in this format, and then I see what it, how to teach that transition. So I have some. I'm not quite sure that rises to the level of, is this ethically wrong to do? But I think the language around it needs to be very. I think that's where I get stuck. Is like, we need to stop calling it what we're calling it, because it's not that anymore. It's something else. We can call it something different, and then I'll feel better about it. But to just continually say that's what we're doing. Oh, I'm teaching you acting for the stage. I don't know about that. I'm teaching you elements of things that could be useful for you if you were on the stage, but I'm not there, so I'm not teaching you that.
Well said, well said. And I'm listening to singing every day, and oh my God, I can't wait to hear a live human voice sing again. And there are many times where if it gets too loud, they just cut out. I can't even hear it anymore over the computer. And then I'm dealing with, fortunately, my students all have computers and a little bit of space. Some of them have more space than others, but the internet connection. Some of my students who stayed on campus or right off campus in housing have wrestled with their internet connection being lousy this whole time. And we'll be in the middle of coaching something and it just freezes. So that's tough to feel like you're really giving them a similar experience to the classroom.
Yeah, there's a lot of joy missing in the process.
Yeah.
I have a question. Katrina, I'm going to let you ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. So this is sort of piggybacking off of what you were just talking about. I'm curious about how you communicate the value of the training experience in a formal university program now as you transition to social distancing and online learning, and like specifically the value of the dollar, because reality is students and parents are spending quite exorbitant amounts of money for these programs. And how in the world do you navigate questions you may be facing about, like, the experience has shifted drastically and you may not be getting the same experience online. And so, reality is that has a value in money. And whether that's come up for you at all, whether that's an administrative question, and how universities might be navigating that as you consider what the future of training programs may look like as a hybrid or fully online. Or
Thanks for asking that, Katrina. Who wants to take a first shot at that?
Well, I don't think it's limited to what we do, because I think the college experience at Harvard and Yale are going to be really different if they don't start on the old campus or in the common or whatever they call them there. And that, I think everybody chooses their college because of the professors and the experience that they perceive they're going to receive. I think that's a question for the administrators as for every program, because every program is impacted in the same way. If I'm a bio major and I'm doing labs in my house rather than in the bio lab, that's really different. And perhaps that value question is really the same there, I think that that's a question for parents to really wrestle with their students with, about, and both those who have taken part in the online experience. And even if we retool and do it very differently in the fall, if that's where we're at, I would understand some people saying, this is no longer what I actually signed up for. I would like to not be a part of that anymore. But that's a choice. And I think it's more the recipient's choice than the provider's choice. We provide what we can do, and then you have to choose whether or not it's worth what you think they're asking you to pay for it.
Yeah.
But again, I'm also responding to the idea that, you know, people will say it's fine if you go to college and you're a bio major and you're not a biologist at the end. You know, you go do something else, you go sell chemicals somewhere. You know, no one would say to that person, you wasted your time in college. But if you go to college and you have a degree in theater or in acting, and you go out and you become a vice president of some corporation, people are like, well, you wasted your time in college. It's crap. You know, it's about the experience too. I'll show.
No, that's great. I appreciate you really. College is a very special place that's much more than the individual 4 classes you take, 5 classes you're taking in a semester.
It goes back to this idea of being challenged to find out what's truly unique about our programs. I agree with Mark that students come to study with the professor specifically. And so developing that relationship, we're talking about more contact with the incoming students over the summer, trying to create and establish those connections to building our community together. Because I think on the other side of that is fear that students will wait a year and take a gap year or use this time in other ways. So it's interesting that this time is affording some people the opportunity to get an education for programs that are suited to online delivery. And in other cases, it's a challenging time either for finance, or the particular field of study and the bang for the buck. So I think those decisions are going to be made this summer in very thoughtful ways. So while we're only 15% down at the moment, you know, people have made deposits, but deposits aren't actually getting them onto our campus and into the community, right? Yeah.
I'm going to pivot to another question. While this is the last call for audience questions, if anybody wants to chime in, please do. We're happy to interact either in written format or by doing the hand raise function. How are you feeling about addressing recruitment right now? You know, I think most universities have extended their deadline for their acceptance, so I'm sure that at some level you maybe still been auditioning students recently or interacting with students that you've accepted. What's that process look like, and how do you feel about it?
I only know the numbers for my own program for musical theater because I'm directly connected to it. But we are at exactly at target and actually a little higher. And they all say they're coming. But Melanie's right. A deposit is just a deposit until they actually come in the fall. But it's been just an unflappable group that says, I'm coming to school, I'll be there. And it's exciting, and I hope they all will be with us.
Yeah, again, without a theater major, I don't have specific program numbers, although I do spend a great deal of time with our entertainment and arts management students, because that's really sort of focused on doing what we do. And I've auditioned students from all over the world, which has been really kind of exciting. You know, I had this amazing Nigerian student who I Zoomed auditioned and interviewed, and it was great. I don't know if he's coming to Drexel or not. But that was really fascinating. So yeah, it does seem that there's a lot of excitement, but I am doing an incredible amount of outreach in terms of sort of bringing all of those students into the fold is throughout the summer, we're doing watch parties. I'm doing different things, partly because a big thing of what I like to do is build community. And so I want them to come in and feel a part of that.
I'm a weirdo eternal optimist, so I've been continuing, the recruitment with my fellow faculty members, and the numbers look quite good right now, but who knows? And certainly, there is some pressure for higher up to make sure the numbers don't fall to nothing. And the way that I'm ethically okay with it is I'm believing deeply in my heart that we're going to create a really valuable experience come the fall for them. I don't know how to progress through this summer without that belief.
Elaine, are you getting a lot of kids from out of state this year? Because I know you tend to have a good portion of students who come from out of state. Are you still seeing those numbers as strong?
Lower numbers on that. We certainly have our usual from Texas and Florida, but the numbers are less spread out and deep out of state than they've been, and yet they're far richer in state. And again, I think that has to do with economics. I think that has to do with a sense of safety of students wanting to stay closer to home for both economics and safety reasons.
I have noticed that as well. It seems like students, some of the things has pivoted at the last minute, and a lot more local students have been accepting at Drexel. And I do think that that's like, keep your family close to home.
Yeah. Yes.
Any last thoughts from any of you?
For me, it's only been, what, a week and a half? I already just terribly miss seeing them the twice a week or of each class. Terribly. There were many, many mornings where I would open up the Zoom and there they would all be, and it just would impact the whole day in a really positive way. So I miss them already. So we're going to do events.
Yeah, I actually re-invited my classes back in. It's like exams are over. There's no obligation to show up. But at the time we've been meeting, I'll be there if you want to show up. And a bunch of them did. It's glorious. You're right. I miss them desperately.
You can come and do a guest lecture for me, so that'll make you feel better.
I love Drexel students. Absolutely.
Well, thank you all very, very, very much for taking the time out of your quarantine days to do this. Thank you for being so transparent and sharing what is normally kept private with the public. It's much appreciated. And I miss you all as well, and hopefully we'll gather later in the summer for cocktails so I can thank you for all this time. Thank you all, and thank you all for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you.
Have a good one.